Hi friends, it's Jessica from Pretty Princeton Paper, and today I'm going to be talking about Lettering 101. I'm going to be doing a couple workshops in the Minneapolis and St. Paul area, and I'm excited about those and meeting a couple of you from nearby, but I know that not everyone is from Minnesota, shocking. So I wanted to do a really quick breakdown and quick fly through about what I will be talking about more at length at these workshops to share the knowledge with you, and maybe it'll help you out get started. A lot of folks, especially in the bullet journal world, are getting into lettering, and it's this massive question of like, how do I start lettering? And so there's a couple different things. I'm going to break down 3 different styles. I think of lettering in 3 different categories. The first that I won't talk about today, but is something that I do, is hand lettering. And that is different to me. It's more artsy, designy. There's more pieces of composition. It's usually done with a pen, and you do a lot more drawing of the letter and breaking it down and shaping it in that way to create your art. So I think of that as a very involved designy thing for hand lettering, usually involving faux calligraphy and things like that. That's not what I'll be talking about today. And then there is like pointed pen calligraphy, and that's done with the nib and holder with the inks. So you dip it in and then you do the calligraphy with that. And although this is something that I love, it's something that I don't usually suggest people to start with, just because it's a little bit more technical, there's a lot more supplies, and is a little harder to get started on. So I usually don't suggest that as the beginning piece. And then there's brush calligraphy, which is done from a marker and done in the same kind of style and technique, but for me, easier to start because all you need is paper and a pen. So that's what I'll be talking about at my workshop and what I'll be breaking down with you today. When I look at calligraphy, there's a couple different styles that you can go from. Some folks start with a more formal style, like a copperplate, which is much more formulaic, and there's a methodology to it, which is really helpful for some when they want to learn. And there's rules, and there's certain angles and techniques that you're supposed to use with that. And then there's a little bit more flexibility in modern calligraphy, where you can change up quite a bit. You can change up some of the shapes and some of the rules to fit your style. There's a lot of different moods that you can create with the modern style, and it's just different. For me, I have a hard time maintaining consistency in my strokes, so I tend toward the modern style, which is a lot more free flow for me, and I can feel how the letters want to come out, and it shows up like this. So when you think about what kind of style or what kind of thing that you are looking to try, those are some of the questions that I will often ask to clarify what it is that you're looking for. Are you looking for something that is much more like you use an everyday pen and you add that to your planner or your list? Then that's hand lettering. If you're looking for something a little bit more maybe fancy for your wedding envelopes or something, then that's more of a pointed pen thing for me. But brush calligraphy is something that I have really loved doing, and I find it easy and also a form of self-care. So that was my workshop that I did last week with a couple friends, was talking about using calligraphy as self-care. To get started, you don't really need much. You just need one pen and some paper. You can use any kind of printer paper. That's what I used for a long time until I started picking up some smoother, fancier stuff. So you can get some marker paper, and that is available at Michael's or your nearest art supply shop, and it's really smooth. I also use Rhodia pads, and that I get at Dick Blick, and again, very smooth. And why you want smooth paper is that all the tips of your markers will avoid fraying if the paper is really smooth and it doesn't cling onto the tip and fray your markers. For the marker piece, there's a whole lot of different things that you could get. I have a lot of recommendations on my blog, so you can always check that out. I have a whole list of things that are, much more affordable or accessible, or a whole list of other fun things that you could try as well. Some of the basic things that I always ask people to start with is a Crayola marker, because you probably have one at home already, and I find it to be very useful when I learn and do brush calligraphy. Popular Tombow dual brush pen. It's for bigger lettering, so that might be your jam. You would also be able to get the Artist Loft version of the dual brush pens at Michael's, which for me, I think they work just as well. They just have fewer colors, which is kind of a bummer. So if you're looking for an affordable way to start off with these dual brush markers, head over to Michael's. And then the last one is a little harder to get, but it's the Pentel Sign brush pen. And this is for more fine work, and I really, really love using these, especially for longer quotes and you want to fit it into a page. The Pentel Sign is my go-to. Some of my starter pens. And what I realized was that before you even begin writing on the page, there's a lot of things that go into setting yourself up for brush calligraphy success. And one of those things is simply how you're sitting and where you're sitting. I like to have everything set on a desk. I like to be able to sit in front of it at the right height, and that is, comfortable for you. I put my paper at an angle. And then here's the part that I think a lot of folks struggle with. Also, I would make sure that you have full resting room for your arm, because you'll use a mixture of your fingers, your hand and your wrist, and then your full arm to create movements to create the letters. So being able to move your arm freely is really helpful for that. So when you start, the grip and the angle of your pen really, really matter. And I didn't realize how much it mattered until I was teaching this class. And I realized that for some people, they like to write like this, and they naturally go to writing with the pen facing downward. This is going to be more difficult to achieve that super thick downstroke that makes calligraphy so distinguishable. So the first thing you have to do is actually turn your grip this way, so that your marker is lined up with the bottom of your piece of paper. This is going to get you the maximum thick to thin ratio so that you create those beautiful swells in your writing. And then the other piece is that your pen is at like a 45-degree angle to the flat surface, right? So 0, 45 degree, and then parallel to the bottom. So these things that like to set you up for success you don't even think about. So once you have that, it might be kind of difficult for some folks, and I know that. And I'm right-handed, so I'm giving tips as a right-handed person. I have a list of suggestions for lefties. If you want to take a peek at that, I know it's a little bit more challenging. When you start doing brush calligraphy, there's this notion of handwriting and cursive being the basis for it. And although knowing cursive is really helpful because it gets you familiar with some of the letter forms, I don't think of them as the same. Some folks, when they write in cursive, right, they write it in one go, basically. And people think that lettering is the same way, and it's not. And actually, there's a lot more pauses, and you lift up the pen a lot more, because to me, it's less like writing and more like drawing. And you're adding in each component of the letter along the way, in a formulaic way, but they're parts nonetheless. If you've ever learned an East Asian language like Japanese or Chinese, the Chinese characters are made up of different strokes and then all together create a word. And that's sort of what you're doing, is that you're combining different pieces, the building blocks, to create different letters, right? So they're all made up of some basic strokes, and that's what you're going to learn first, are the basic strokes. And here are a couple of them. I hope I remember them all. The thin upstroke. This is how a lot of times you enter into the letter, right? You going into it with an upstroke. And that's usually the thin part. If you're just starting, don't worry about how thin that is. I know that we can get hung up on that, and there's people out there I admire with amazing tiny hairline upstrokes. Don't worry about that right now. If you're just learning, focus on making sure that there's a difference between your upstroke and the thickness of your downstroke. And as long as there is a difference, I don't care, right? This is not about getting to that point today. It's about learning and the familiarity of these different strokes, okay? So there's that downstroke. There's the crossbar for your crossing your T's. There's this little stem loop thing here. These are really official terms. I hope you know. There is the underturn. oh, sorry, overturn, my bad. And this is the underturn. And you'll recognize these shapes in the N's or M's, and this is where you see like the U shape or the bottom of a T shape, for example. And then these come together into a compound curve. Oval. And then the ascending loop. And you'll see this on H's, for example, or F's. And then there's the descending loop that you'll see on G's and Y's and J's. So you start to see how they all might start coming together. But I will do rows and rows of practice, just like one row of these, and just keep going. It's sort of a meditative practice. That's why I love brush calligraphy so much, is that you just take a marker and your paper and you can spend a lot of time just focused on this practice of getting consistent strokes. And that's how you get familiar with those motions coming out of your body and getting familiar with the way this pen wants to write, because they all write differently, okay? So when you start off, I would just keep doing a lot of these practice drills, because you can't skip them. You can't magically go and start drawing beautiful words and without going through this work of the drills, right? No sport has ever worked that way. When you start to build the letters, I won't go through all the alphabet right now, but I have a lot of videos on my letter archive that do go through all the letters if you want to go through step by step how I draw all the different letters and the stylized versions of them. But what you'll see is, for example, in copperplate, the A is just a combination of an oval and that little stem, right? A C is half that oval. A D is that oval, and now with that longer stem down, right? In H, ascending loop, and then the compound curve. In I, with the entrance stroke, and that stem. J, entrance stroke. Okay. So you're starting to see how these pieces fit together, and you'll get more and more familiar with it. And as you learn these basic strokes, then you start to stylize and play around with things. When you're starting off, you want to focus on that thick and thin, right? Raising and releasing the pressure, learning how much pressure you can put on there to achieve that look. And then you start playing around with getting thinner upstrokes and doing different kinds of practices for consistency. So for example, you want to make sure eventually that your spacing is consistent across all the letters, that your downstrokes are at the same kind of angle and slant, that your like A's and your D's, those circles have kind of a similar shape, so that there is that visual consistency. And then you start playing with things like flourishes, you know, and that's where you use your whole arm again. You use the whole part of your body to do some of these. But that's a progress, right? It took me a long time, months and months and months of practicing to get even comfortable with the way that the pen flows in my hand. So when you start, again, focus just on the thick and the thin, making sure you can see a difference. And then seeing how these different basic strokes come together to create those different letters that you see on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever. But most of all, I just want to encourage you to keep practicing, because my stuff did not always look like this, right? I can do a flip through of like my old stuff, and just how over time it has gotten better and things are more consistent now than they were before. But it took me, see, lots of these drills for me to get to even where my skills are at now, which I'm still improving on, see? But I just hope that this gives you some of the encouragement and some of the knowledge to start. And I'll list some of my favorite resources. They're on my blog, but I'll list my blog posts down below. So make sure you go through that section and just click on all these links, because there are people out there who've been doing this a long time and are brilliant teachers. And I highly recommend that you take some time and check out their stuff. But in the meantime, I hope that you enjoy this little breakdown. I hope it gives you a better sense of what it is that you're looking for as you go into your lettering journey. If you have questions, let me know down below. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, share, whatever. I just hope that you enjoy it. I'll see you next time.